All right. Thank you, Akshara, for getting us all the details on that very important story. Well, those are the details coming in. We'll continue tracking this story and much more here on CNN News 18 on the other side of a quick break. Stay tuned.
The Aam Aadmi Party is refusing to acknowledge that their minister is getting VVIP treatment. How does this differentiate a party that claims to stand for the commoner?
There could be nuclear weapon misuse threat which looms large in a nation that is in disarray, political instability, fight within the military establishment, and of course the economic pressures.
Many of these fellows had got letters of appointment. It was then put on hold. Why? The process has been compromised, right? You've given somebody a job and then you're saying, oh, by the way, I'm taking back the appointment letter.
The parents shift their home just a month before Aftab's arrest because they knew also of the nature of aggression and torture Aftab had subjected Shraddha to.
Good evening, hello and welcome. You're watching CNN News 18. This is Nation at 5 with me, Poonam Burde. The central government has responded to the Supreme Court over forced conversions, terming them a serious issue. The centre, in its 9-page affidavit, has said that it is important to protect the vulnerable sections of society. This comes after an application was filed in the top court seeking directions to stop forced religious conversions by threat and intimidation. The petitioner, Advocate Ashwini Upadhyay, also sought directions to the centre to review visa rules under the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act pertaining to NGOs, foreign missionaries and religious preachers. The Solicitor General has called this a menace, while the top court has stated that this is a serious issue. Now, the next hearing will take place on Monday next week.
धर्मांतरण एक राष्ट्रीय समस्या है। बंगाल में भी हो रहा है, गुजरात में भी हो रहा है, हिमाचल में भी हो रहा है, पंजाब में भी हो रहा है, यूपी बिहार में तो पहले से हो ही रहा है, नॉर्थ ईस्ट में तो पहले एकदम कंप्लीट खत्म हो चुका है, हिंदू वहां खत्म हो चुके हैं। या तो केंद्र सरकार पार्लियामेंट में एक अलग से कानून बनाए, नहीं तो इंडियन पिनल कोड का जो चैप्टर 15 है, चैप्टर 15 ऑफेंस रिलेटिंग टू रिलीजन, उसको अमेंड करे, उसमें 2 नई धारा जोड़े। जब तक विदेशी फंडिंग नहीं रुकेगी, हवाला की फंडिंग नहीं रुकेगी, FCRA की फंडिंग नहीं रुकेगी और धर्मांतरण कराने वालों की 100% प्रॉपर्टी जब्त करने और 10 से 20 साल की सजा देने के लिए कानून नहीं बनेगा, तब तक धर्मांतरण नहीं रुकेगा।
Now, the petition seeks a national law for forced anti-conversions. Has the time come? Because we do know at least 9 states in the country actually have such a law in place, including many BJP-ruled states. Now, let's break it down for our viewers. Here's what the Supreme Court said 2 weeks ago when they said that this was a serious issue. They said that forced religious conversions is an extremely serious issue and must be dealt so. Today, in the affidavit, the central government has said that the Union of India, which is the central government, is cognizant of the gravity of the issue, going on record to say that we know it's a menace, we know it's a big problem and it needs to be dealt with immediately. The Supreme Court had observed that forced religious conversions may actually affect the nation's security. So there are national security ramifications as well. In response, the centre today in its affidavit has said that it is a public order issue which is essentially a state subject, and many of these states have already passed this enactment. Like I mentioned, the affidavit also speaks of 9 different states in the country that have implemented such a law. The Supreme Court 2 weeks ago had said that this issue of forced religious conversions affects the freedom of religion and of conscience. Today, the centre agreed. They said, yes, we know it's a menace. They said, yes, we know it is a serious issue and we understand the gravity and the enactments that are necessary for protecting the rights of these vulnerable classes, vulnerable sections of society. Now, the Supreme Court had also asked the government to step in. The Supreme Court 2 weeks ago had said that the central government must step in and give out steps to find a solution to curb such forced conversions. Now, while there was no timeline set or no measures that were listed by the central government in its affidavit today, the centre went on record to say that they will take this issue up in all of its seriousness and all appropriate steps will be taken. So that's as far as the centre stand go. The next hearing, of course, is going to be on the 5th of December, where these arguments will go into further detail. Whether or not the Supreme Court actually issues a directive for the central government to come out with such a law, that remains to be seen. But Ananya Bhatnagar, my colleague, now joins me for more on this. And Ananya, it's a 9-page affidavit that we've accessed here on CNN News 18. And the centre has put the onus on the state governments, isn't it? Because they mention of how public order is a state subject and many states in the country already have a law. So are they trying to perhaps circumvent the question of having to enact a national law by the centre?
Well, definitely the central government has clarified that this is a public order issue and public order comes under the state subject. And various states, in fact, 9 states already have anti-conversion law. Specifically, UP has it. The states also have it. But what has been very, very categorically stated by the central government is that it is a very, very poignant issue and the vulnerable sections of the society have to be in fact, protected from such a conversion taking place. In fact, while the hearing was taking place today, the judges said that it's a serious issue. And Tushar Mehta, the Solicitor General of India, while responding to their observation, said it's not only a serious issue, but a menace that is to be controlled. And that's the reason why various states have, in fact, anti-conversion law. And the central government is also very poignant of this particular issue. In fact, it is taking steps in order to curb all of these menaces. And this is a very, very serious issue and the central government is dealing with it. The Supreme Court, remember 2 weeks ago, had said it's a national security, it can result into a national security threat, and that's the reason why, in fact, the central government's affidavit too, though it's a very, very small affidavit, it's a 9-page affidavit, but then it's a very strong one. It's a heavyweight affidavit that's coming from the central government because it's the first response of the central government when it comes to religious conversions, when it comes to, in fact, dealing with this particular issue. It's the first time the central government has come before a court of law, in fact, the topmost court of the country, and said that it is a very, very serious issue. It's a state subject, hence the state governments are having a law, but nothing has been said so far as a pan-India law on anti-conversion is not, but at the same point of time, the states are dealing with it, is what the stand of the centre is, and it's a very, very serious issue, is what the centre calls it.
It's also something that the Supreme Court reiterated today of the gravity of the situation that really needs to be looked into, which is why measures need to be taken. For the moment, Ananya, thank you so much for getting us the latest from court. Is it time, though, for a national law, or should we wait for states to enact such a law like 9 states already have in place? To discuss that, joining me on this broadcast is senior editor of Swaraj magazine, Tushar Gupta, political analyst Kapil Madan joins us. Advocates Aditya Srinivasan and Tausif Ahmed Khan also join me on this broadcast. And Mr. Khan, I'd like to begin with you. We've seen the kind of noise from political parties, or the kind of criticism from political parties that has come to the fore in these respective states when such a law was being enacted. Do you think nationally, even if the Supreme Court does direct for such a law to be enacted, or at least for the government to hold considerations, to hold consultations with stakeholders, there will ever be consensus from every political party in this country for such a law?
Now you see, only an illiterate person would say that our country does not have a law which forbids forced conversion. Forced conversion, we already have a law. And on the other side...
And yet we have the Supreme Court, sir, today asking for the centre to take steps. So there's something definitely is amiss.
No, that is politics. That helps BJP fix a political narrative to suit their divisive politics and their political agenda. And why I say this? You see, on one hand, we have a Constitution of India which gives a very clear right to all Indian citizens to practice, profess, and propagate their religion.
Sure.
That the Supreme Court is very clear on that. From time to time, there are judgments by Supreme Court which says that there is no doubt about the right of any citizen to practice, profess, and propagate their religion. And on the other hand, we already have law which says that forced conversion is a crime.
Right.
Please show me an example of any state where this is not deemed as a crime. Forced conversion, why forced consumption is a crime? Forced conversion is a crime because it takes away a right of a citizen to practice, profess, and propagate a religion of his or her own choice.
A fundamental right the Constitution guarantees them.
Yes, the moment anyone is forcefully converted into another religion, that moment that person's right to practice, propagate, and profess his or her own religion
Sure.
is taken away. Therefore, the law is already there. Why this topic is being debated now is only to set a political narrative and nothing else.
You say that about the BJP, perhaps about the centre as well, but Mr. Khan, do you say that about the Supreme Court too? Because the Supreme Court had asked the centre to put this affidavit on record 2 weeks ago. The Supreme Court had said that not only is this a serious issue, it could also have national security ramifications, and which is why the centre must list what steps they'll take.
See, court is sitting there. Court, when any party approaches a court with the petition, court looks into that petition on the basis of what the facts, what the law is pleaded in that petition. Court entertains those petitions. It is
Sure.
very normal for court to ask the state, where state is a party, to ask a response from the state. It is very normal.
But
What would be
correct me
what
if
would
I'm
be
wrong, Mr.
abnormal
Khan. Correct
if-
me if I'm wrong, but the court also has the right and the prerogative to dismiss any such petitions which they think are flimsy. And if, like you say, there's already a law and there's absolutely no need to discuss this, then perhaps the Supreme Court would have never entertained it. Perhaps we should
Absolutely,
give
court
that
can
benefit of the
dismiss
doubt to the
petition.
wisdom of the judges in our highest court.
Depending on the facts pleaded in the case, in the petition, court has full right to dismiss the petition. Now, one has to come and argue the affidavits which are filed in opposition to the petition. They will have to plead the case whether this is only a political narrative trying to
Sure.
be said, or if there is really a facts pleaded which requires court
Sure, but there was a hearing that took place 2 weeks ago where the Supreme Court said this was a serious issue. They asked for the centre to list its steps that they would take. Today there was another hearing where again the Supreme Court reiterated that yes, this is a serious issue and we need to talk about it. And the next hearing is in a week from now. So there definitely perhaps is some merit in the arguments that are being made by this petitioner, which is why the Supreme Court is actually hearing this case. I'll come back to you, but let me also get in the other panelists on this broadcast. And Aditya Srinivasan, Tawseef Ahmed Khan says we already have a law. This is nothing but political pandering, which is why things like this keep coming up. Why even talk about it? There is a anti-conversion, forced conversion law nationally. There's also now another version of this law in several states.
Yeah, look, so firstly, I don't think there's any problem with the fact that as and when the issue is, it sort of reaches some importance, it gets taken up for consideration by the Supreme Court. That is a prerogative of the court. That is a prerogative of those who bring such petitions to the court. And I think the Supreme Court is well within its rights to consider such an issue, and it has considered this issue. Now, coming for a second to the affidavit that was filed by the centre, I think essentially what the centre has said is that, look, this is a problem, and there are several states in our union that have already legislated what are known as right to freedom of religion acts or freedom of religion laws across the country, which essentially criminalize instances where persons have used coercion or force or fraud or allurement to convert another person's faith. Look, it's one thing to say that today I as an individual can convert my faith from X to Y. It's a very different thing to say that I have the ability to convert someone else's faith from X to Y. The latter is simply not permitted under the Constitution, not under any interpretation of the word propagated in Article 25.
Right. Right, and that is also something that the affidavit of the centre today mentioned, that there are certain provisions in the Constitution that are the fundamental rights that are enshrined in the Constitution to every single individual, and there is a violation of that, which is why we need to talk about this and which is why perhaps even the Supreme Court has asked for it. But Tushar Gupta, in this particular affidavit, while recognizing or while saying that yes, we're cognizant of the gravity of the issue, the centre has not really gone on to say what it is that they want to do. They have simply said that this is a state subject and certain states already have such a law in place. Now, some would say that's the centre shying away from biting the bullet.
Good evening, Poonam. See, there are two aspects to it. Let's break it down one by one. The centre really needs to come in. It cannot leave it to the states anymore because there is a national law that is needed against forced conversion. Now, the problem is that every time we start talking about this very difficult subject, Someone makes it about Hindu majoritarianism. Someone makes this about Hindu nationalism. Now, people need to understand that the people involved in this conversion ecosystem, be the missionaries who were just deported from Assam recently, a couple of weeks ago, 10 of them, European mercenaries were deported, missionaries, pardon, were deported from Assam. They do not care about the politics of the land. The political parties need to understand that the people involved in the conversion ecosystem, be it the financing, be it the people on the ground, they do not care about the politics. So let's not make it about politics. Point number one. Point number two, we also have to look at conversions in very different manner. Look, the kind of conversions that are being carried out by missionaries in Assam is very different from the one that is happening in Kerala. And the one that is happening in Kerala is very different from the one happening in Punjab. On News 18 itself, Poonam, we discussed a number of times the number of Christian converts that have suddenly sprung up in the state of Punjab. And they all are being lured. Some of them are being told that we'll give you jobs in Canada. Some of them are being promised, some kind of educational support that gets them out of the country. So all this is heinous fraud that is being converted in the name of freedom of religion and expression. That is wrong. That is what the Supreme Court is trying to call out.
Right.
And the center needs to take action. But the problem is, every time we start talking about forced conversions, we reduce it to a Hindu-Muslim debate. Now, BJP is not there in Punjab. BJP is not there in Kerala. But there are conversions happening there. So let's not make it about politics.
Right.
Number
so
three,
there is
and
some
a very crucial point.
Right. So there is some reality to this, at least in the pockets of the country. It's not necessarily a rhetoric like many in the opposition are claiming it to be, Kapil Madan, that every time there is talk of such a law, even when at state levels, BJP ruled states passed this law in the last few years, opposition came out and said that this is nothing but another tool by the Saffron Party to target minorities in this country. Kapil Madan?
Yes, this question. Sorry, I couldn't hear. Can you please repeat the question?
Yes, we're talking about, can you actually deny that there is a reality of forced conversions? It does happen in this country. There are cases that come forward, like Tushar Gupta was also pointing out from Assam. There were several European nationals that were arrested for such a case. It's not just about rhetoric. There has to be some reality, which is why even the Supreme Court wants to hear all sides in this particular issue. Then can we hope for consensus from all political parties on this particular issue, or will it just going to be, or is it just going to be the BJP targeting minorities with laws like this?
Now, let's look at the petition. I was carefully reading the affidavit filed by Mr. Ashwini Upadhyay. Though the entire petition talk about forceful conversion, and it is a serious issue, and it must be debated. It must be debated in the parliament, and the appropriate laws should be made, because once there is a forceful conversion, maybe by allurement, maybe by any kind of threat, then in that situation you directly hit Article 25, you directly hit 14, you directly hit Article 19, because you are now forcing that individual so that he does not profess his choice of faith, his or her religious faith. So I agree with you insofar as that is concerned. But if you look at the petition filed by Mr. Upadhyay, though he talks about the issues of forceful conversion, but if you see his prayers, he is suddenly seeking a relief which are barely political. I mean, he talks about that, you should make visa rule for religious preachers. I mean, he talks about review FCRA rules for foreign funded NGOs, etc. So the proof is in the pudding. Now here, had it been he was seriously concerned with those cases where there were an actual forceful religious conversion, then in that situation you will seek the redressal of that problem. Under the garb of that problem, which I agree, in some cases, yes, we have, such instances. You can't create, you change the goalpost completely, which to my understanding and belief is more of a political nature. That's all I have to say here.
Sure. So you're saying the issue exists, Tushar Gupta, the issue exists, there is a problem. But what this petitioner or what the BJP is trying to do is use one particular instance, find a loophole, and then use it to their convenience.
But there's not one particular instance, is there, Poonam? Or the same question stands for Kapil. You look at what's happening in Punjab. I mean, of all states, it's not even a Hindu conversion that's going on in numbers. It's Sikhs who are being converted, Dalit Sikhs who are being converted into Christianity. And the interesting part is, most of these Dalit Sikhs do not change their names. So they're availing the benefits that are meant for the Dalits. by the government while being a Christian. That is the kind of fraud that needs to be called out. Now, there is a lot of money involved. So FCRA becomes important. Who are these people who are coming to Punjab, doing all the conversions, carrying out these mass conversion events? Who are these people? We saw one in Delhi where someone was converting someone in Buddhism and there was an Aam Aadmi Party minister. Look, there is a lot of money involved on the ground. There are people on the ground. We every day come across videos on YouTube and Twitter where people are being promised treatments and they're falling on the ground and doing whatnot. All this is being done with money, with people on the ground. This is what needs to be controlled. So if you want visa controls, that's not a bad idea. If you want strict FCRA controls, that's not a bad idea. At the end of the day, you need to understand it's not just about one community, that is Hindus. Sikhs are also being impacted. Muslims are also being impacted. Buddhists, Jains, Christians, everyone is being impacted. That is what the court is trying to ask. That can't the center think of one central legislation that covers all the states, especially the ones that do not have a legislation against forced conversion right now. That's all.
Absolutely, and which is why perhaps a uniform mechanism is what is required, or at least whether or not that is something that is viable. The conversation is currently at that particular stage. We're not even looking at bringing in a law. Tawseef Ahmed Khan, the conversation right now is whether or not it's viable to have a law. Is it required? What happens if we have a more stringent law in this particular case? Because like you said, yes, we have a law, but clearly that's not helping. We are seeing cases across the country from different parts of the country, from different states ruled by different political parties.
No, if we have to talk about cases of conversion, we have seen if at mass level there has been conversion of Dalit people, members of Dalit community converting to Buddhism. We have seen that happening at mass level. A proper stage is organized and media coverage is there about these cases. Then there are instances where I am absolutely sure that our country has such a huge population. There has to be cases. There may be cases where people are forced, converted forcefully. But if someone comes and says, "Oh, look," if someone belong with political motive comes to the media and goes to the court and through court petition sends it all this for circulation in media and says, "Oh, the people of India, please look, we do not have a anti-conversion law. I am the one who's going to bring this anti-conversion law." First of all, it is not the court who makes the law. It is Parliament who makes the law.
Absolutely, and I don't think anyone is saying that we don't have a law. Everyone acknowledges we have a law, and yet the situation is as grave as it is. But continue.
Then this issue is the domain of the Parliament. Court cannot today lay down the law.
Sure, which is why right at the beginning I asked the question. I started this debate by asking that question. Do you think we'll ever reach a stage where there will be consensus among all political parties over what seems to be clearly an issue in at least certain parts of the country? It has nothing to do with a political party or a particular religion.
Then this consensus has to be reached in a democratic debate inside the House of the Parliament. Not through petitions in court and then the propaganda being circulated through social media and
but it's as much the petitioner's right to approach a court, sir. The legal recourse option is also something that is
legal recourse. Yes, is available to the petitioner. But we need to really check whether this person has come with a clean hand or whether he has a political motive behind it.
I'm sure the courts will try and weed that out, but the court is giving the space for this petition to be heard, for the centre to put its affidavit on record and for the hearing to continue. So while that happens, should we be casting aspersions on whether or not this particular petitioner is credible, whether or not the issue at all is credible? Because some would say, because some would say, Mr. Srinivasan, that this actually gives leeway to those missionaries, to those foreign-funded NGOs perhaps, who are trying to foment trouble in this country.
Yeah, I know. And look, we have to understand the whole scope, the breadth and the scope of the petition. All right, there are a number of things that are being asked for. This is a public interest litigation, which means it's open to the Supreme Court to also go beyond the scope of just what is specifically set out in the petition and look at the issue on a large-scale basis and to understand all of the contours of it. There may be things which the Supreme Court may not be able to do. For example, the previous speaker correctly said that the Supreme Court cannot legislate which is actually the prerogative of the Parliament. However, there are questions that the Supreme Court can put to various stakeholders, including the state, the central government.
Sure.
It may be the case that they may ask questions of the state governments. They may ask questions of particular ministries in the union, and to find out what they are doing, for example, to curtail the impact of foreign-funded NGOs in financing conversions. They may try and understand what, or for that matter, whether there's a link between money laundering and conversions. They may ask questions of the Ministry of Home Affairs to understand what is being done at that level to tackle the menace. There are a number of things that can be done in a PIL. The Supreme Court has wide powers to ask these questions, and I don't think we should be looking at the PIL as just being something that's trying to bring in a law through the back door. I don't think that's the purpose of the PIL. There are a number of things that are being asked for, and a number of things that the Supreme Court can ask for. And I think we should be looking at it from that perspective.
Right, because like the Supreme Court has also mentioned that this is a serious issue, it is a menace that we need to deal with, and the centre needs to come out and ensure that certain steps are taken. What those steps are, that question has also been asked of the centre. They perhaps will be asked of the states as well, where these laws have been enacted, as mentioned by the centre in its affidavit today. The next hearing is going to take place on the 5th of December, which is next Monday. Now, we do see politics brewing over this particular issue, but can you really deny it? Can you really deny it as just rhetoric and not reality? That's something that the country is also asking. I thank you all, gentlemen, for joining us here on this broadcast with your perspective. A quick break on this edition, but lots lined up for you on Nation at 5. Don't go anywhere.
मानव कल्याण की हमने आशा की है, हमने मन्नत मांगी है। देश की जनता, हमारे प्रदेश की जनता सभी खुशहाल हों, वैभवशाली बने और इनके रास्तों में किसी प्रकार की बाधा ना आए, इस प्रकार की कामना करते हुए। और अभी जम्मू कश्मीर सरकार के साथ हरियाणा सरकार का एक हमारा IT टेक्नोलॉजी के सिस्टम को लेकर के बहुत से हमने नए जो प्रयोग किए हैं हरियाणा में, और यहाँ की सरकार को पसंद आए हैं, तो एक MOU साइन करने की इच्छा यहाँ प्रकट की है, हमने स्वीकार किया, एक MOU होगा।
Hello and welcome. This is CNN News 18. I'm Grihatul Siddiqui. Let's now take a look at some of the important news stories doing the rounds both nationally and internationally. While addressing a rally in Gujarat's Kher, Prime Minister Narendra Modi attacked Congress for questioning surgical strikes. Prime Minister said that Congress indulges in vote bank politics. The Prime Minister also said that some new political parties have also decided to adopt this kind of appeasement politics.
हम कहते रहे कि आतंक को टारगेट करो, लेकिन कांग्रेस की सरकार आतंक को नहीं, मोदी को टारगेट करने में लगी रही। परिणाम ये हुआ कि आतंकियों के हौसले बढ़ते गए। देश के हर बड़े शहर में आतंकवाद सिर चढ़कर बोलने लगा।
Another video of Aam Aadmi Party MLA Satyendra Jain has surfaced from the Tihar Jail. The video was tweeted by the BJP today. In this latest video, a few men are seen as cleaning Satyendra Jain's cell and organizing his bed. The BJP has claimed that 10 men are giving room service to Aam Aadmi Party minister in jail. Now, this is the fourth video of Jain that has been circulated ahead of the crucial MCD polls in the national capital.
जो वीडियो दिखाई दे रहा है कि किस प्रकार से मंत्री बनाए रखे गए सत्येंद्र जैन अरविंद केजरीवाल के द्वारा, ताकि वो वसूली कर सके, मालिश ले सके, पकवान खा सके, और उनको रूम सर्विस मिल रही थी तिहाड़ के अंदर। हम तो धन्यवाद देना चाहेंगे अरविंद केजरीवाल आपको कि लंदन, न्यूयॉर्क, पेरिस बनी नहीं, परंतु तिहाड़, थाईलैंड और रूम सर्विस और रिजॉर्ट जरूर बन गया। परंतु सवाल ये पैदा होता है कि ये प्रमाण आने के बाद आज भी सत्येंद्र जैन का इस्तीफा नहीं लिया जाएगा।
BJP chief JP Nadda slammed Arvind Kejriwal-led Aam Aadmi Party during BJP's door-to-door election campaign in Delhi. Nadda, during this campaign, said that Tihar Jail has become a massage parlor. People who were saying that a physiotherapist is giving the massage has turned out to be a rapist, he said.
वो मसाज सेंटर बना दिया, रेपिस्ट थेरेपिस्ट बन गया। शिक्षा का और स्वास्थ्य की जो उन्होंने चिंता की है जेल में, उनको सबको जेल में भेजने का इंतजाम हमारी जनता करेगी।
After Satyendra Jain's latest video from Tihar Jail emerged today, the BJP went all guns blazing against the Aam Aadmi Party. The Saffron Party tweeted a poster of Arvind Kejriwal and Satyendra Jain. BJP claimed that Jain has turned the jail into a meeting court.
किस प्रकार से वो जेल में रहकर भी डिक्टेट करता है टर्म्स, ये हिंदुस्तान की राजधानी दिल्ली, उसकी सरकार और उसकी जो तरीके हैं, अपार्ट फ्रॉम डिस्कशंस एंड तू मैं सत्येंद्र जैन जी के रख रखाव के लिए, उनके रूम के मेंटेनेंस के लिए, उनके रूम के अपकीप के लिए
Welcome back. Ahead of 2024 general elections, Rahul Gandhi has now come out and said that the decision to contest again from Amethi will be taken closer to elections. And right now, his focus is only on the Bharat Jodo Yatra. Remember, the Bharat Jodo Yatra is currently in Madhya Pradesh, where Rahul Gandhi addressed a news conference this afternoon. But when asked about his 2024 prospects as far as contesting the elections go, and when asked if whether or not he'll go back to Amethi and not his current seat of Wayanad, he remained non-committal. Pallavi Ghosh, my colleague, now joins me for more on this. Pallavi, it's interesting the kind of comment that came to the fore from Rahul Gandhi. He remained completely non-committal. He says we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But last time around, he was handed a defeat with a big margin, at least 50,000 votes if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, in fact, it's not been very good innings really for the Congress party. As far as Uttar Pradesh goes, there's only one person who's a member of parliament from the state, and that's Sonia Gandhi from Rai Bareli. And in fact, in almost whole of Uttar Pradesh, the Congress is almost non-existent. So Amethi becomes a very dicey affair as far as Rahul Gandhi goes. In fact, last time round, I remember when I was there in Amethi, the winds of change were very, very clear. The biggest criticism which was mounting against Rahul Gandhi was that he was hardly to be seen over there. And Smriti Irani, despite the fact that she had lost the elections, had continued to keep on coming back to Amethi. From an absolutely zero presence in Amethi, the BJP has today a huge number of party workers. They have a huge party office over there. And Smriti Irani at least tries to make a point to keep going there. It's not going to be an easy task to take her on. But as of now, the Congress party still doesn't want to be very clear on whether Rahul Gandhi is going to go back to Uttar Pradesh. Not just that, whether there is going to be anyone contesting from the Gandhi family from Rai Bareli itself.
Absolutely, Gandhi bastion and losing it as far as Amethi was concerned, it was a huge blow. And like you said, even the election before that in 2014, even though Smriti Irani did lose, she did manage to make a dent as far as the vote share and the margin of victory for Rahul Gandhi was concerned.
I think it was a very humiliating defeat really, because Amethi has always been the family bastion and the Gandhi family has always been contesting from there. There was only barring one exception when the Gandhi family lost from there, but otherwise it's been essentially either Rajiv Gandhi, Indira Gandhi before that from Rai Bareli, and of course Rahul Gandhi's debut into active politics came in from Amethi. As I said, last time round we saw the winds of change. There were people who earlier were swearing by the Gandhi family were actually quite critical of it by saying that we hardly see our MP over here. I think also the fact that the Congress was no longer in power at the centre made it doubly damaging for Rahul Gandhi and also for the Congress party in the state.
Absolutely, and this comment also is interesting because in the last couple of months where there was controversy over Smriti Irani's daughter as well, we had actually seen Smriti Irani who had come out and said that let Rahul Gandhi come and fight me in Amethi in 2024 and don't do this with my family.
Well, 2019, if there was one giant killer, it certainly was Smriti Irani. I mean, who would have thought that someone who had no base over there at all, someone who had lost the last time round, that's before 2019 in Amethi, would actually go back. But I think what really worked in her favour, and this is something which many people would tell me when I would travel in the last 2019 elections, that the fact that she kept on coming back, she endeared herself to the women voters, many first-time voters also, they ended up voting for her. She still keeps going back and she keeps on throwing this taunt, but naturally at Rahul Gandhi, that you have to prove yourself. You still have to get over the fact that I managed to defeat you from the family bastion.
Right, Pallavi, thank you so much for getting us the latest as far as the fight between the Congress and the BJP electorally ahead of 2020 is concerned. For now, shifting focus to the battle that's going to happen in the near future, and that's in Gujarat. Now, Prime Minister Modi yesterday launched an all-out offensive against the Congress party. He raked up the Batla House encounter during a rally in Kheda yesterday. He claimed that terrorism had peaked under the Congress government. He even termed the grand old party as terror sympathizers, called them out for their appeasement politics. He further added that the Congress tried to label Hindus as terrorists after the deadly 26/11 Mumbai terror attacks. Now, the Congress hit back in equal measure. President of the party, Mallikarjun Kharge, hit back at the Prime Minister today, where he said that we do not need lectures on terrorism from the Prime Minister or from the BJP because we've lost two of our own. Indira Gandhi and Rajiv Gandhi. Our sacrifice to terror is much bigger.
आप याद करिए, दिल्ली में जब बाटला हाउस एनकाउंटर हुआ तो कांग्रेस के नेता आतंकियों के समर्थन में रोने लगे, रोने। कांग्रेस की सरकार आतंक को नहीं, मोदी को टारगेट करने में लगी रही। परिणाम ये हुआ कि आतंकियों के हौसले बढ़ते गए। देश के हर बड़े शहर में आतंकवाद सिर चढ़कर बोलने लगा। लेकिन कांग्रेस हो या वोट बैंक के भूखे कुछ दल, ये लोग सर्जिकल स्ट्राइक पर भी सवाल उठाते हैं, हमारी सेनाओं के सामर्थ्य पर भी सवाल उठाते हैं। आज आपसे बात करते हुए मुझे 14 साल पहले हुए मुंबई हमले की तस्वीरें भी याद आ रही है। देश पर हुआ ये सबसे बड़ा आतंकी हमला था, लेकिन इस हमले के बाद कांग्रेस सरकार आतंक के आकाओं पर कार्रवाई करने के बजाय हिंदुओं पर आतंकी होने का लेबल चिपकाने की साजिश कर रही थी।
हमारे लोग सूली पे चढ़े, 10-10 साल, 20-20 साल जेलों में रहे, घर बार छोड़े, यूनिवर्सिटी छोड़े, स्कूल्स छोड़े, छोड़कर स्वतंत्रता आंदोलन में कूद पड़ के इस देश को आजादी दिलाए। मोदी जी, शाह जी सभी परेशान हैं, उसीलिए उन्होंने अपने पूरे हिंदुस्तान की फौज बीजेपी की सिर्फ गुजरात में लगा दी और हमारे लोग गांव-गांव में, बूथ पे, सिटी में लड़ रहे हैं।
Pallavi continues to be with us. And Pallavi, you're on ground there in Gujarat. The campaign is at a fever pitch. And 3 days from now, the first vote is going to be cast. But we've seen the kind of nationalism pitch that the BJP has made, especially in the recent past, across many states. And Gujarat is no different. Is this now the new pitch that really has pushed aside the traditional roti kapda makan issue as far as elections are concerned?
Well, yes, I agree with you to a very great extent. In fact, many of the hoardings which we have been seeing while traveling through Gujarat, we have been seeing it all being called Shakti, which means BJP is talking about power, BJP is talking about empowering the people, and also talks about law and order and national security. Now, Kheda was a district where the Prime Minister made that comment for the first time during these elections, and he chose the place very, very carefully. The Kheda, which is a tobacco district, as it's called in Gujarat, it's also been a center of an agitation agitation against the British because of the tobacco prices, and it was something which was triggered off really by the support which came in from the Mahatma. Now, this was used by the Prime Minister to make the point that, it's the people's power which reigns supreme. You take on the establishment if you need to take on the establishment for your own sake. And when he was speaking yesterday in Kheda, and I was there listening to his speech, he was essentially talking about empowering the people and also telling them that your development and vikas can only come when there is national security, when there is law and order, and Gujarat also happens to be a border state. And that is when he started taking pot shots at both the Congress party as well as an unnamed party, when he said there are newer parties who are also coming up who are indulging in vote bank politics because they want to adopt a shortcut to politics and to victory. And therefore those pot shots came in on Butler House encounter, where he said that there are Congress leaders who shed their tears, but also the Congress is pro-terror. Also very quickly, when the first time round the NDA came back to power under Narendra Modi, they came on the pitch of a soft anti-terror policy of the UPA. That was the same pitch which was actually brought up and resurfaced by the Prime Minister, mentioning it at the Kheda rally.
And are we going to see that as the plank for 2024 as well? Because those elections aren't too far away either.
Well, I think so, absolutely. I mean, Pakistan, China, these are the issues which even the opposition, particularly the Congress party, will keep raising up, and particularly Rahul Gandhi will keep taking it up. And I think that's exactly going to be the USP of the BJP, to present themselves as a government which is strong, which cares for the people, and in multiple ways. I mean, as I said, development can only come in when there's a semblance of peace, when there's a semblance of national security. You become stronger as a global part. That's also going to be one pitch which is going to come in from the BJP. So these kind of narratives are likely to push on till the 2024 Lok Sabha elections as well.
Right, Pallavi, whether this resonates with the voters of Gujarat and does that help in favor of the BJP, we'll find out sooner than later. For the moment, thank you so much for getting us the latest. Shifting focus now to China, where there is a massive uprising that seems to be taking place, which is an extreme rarity in a country like China. Citizens are protesting. They're out on streets against the strict zero-COVID guidelines that have been imposed by the government. These protests have now spread across big cities in the country. Many are demanding President Xi Jinping's resignation. Remember, 10 people died in an apartment fire on Thursday, and that really is what triggered this massive unrest. Authorities have been criticized over the rescue delays that were caused due to this excessive lockdown measures. The protesters believe that because there were these excessive lockdown measures that were in place, the authorities could not reach the people that were caught in the fire in that apartment, and 10 innocent lives were lost. Meanwhile, coronavirus cases continue to rise in the country. There are at least 40,000 infections on an average that are reported every single day. Take a look at the special CNN report of what's exactly transpiring in China.
It was quite extraordinary to see the Shanghai protesters chant slogans directly targeting the ruling Communist Party and its leader Xi Jinping, because up to this point, even the most vehement critics or opponents of the zero-COVID policy have been dancing around this issue, saying how the top leadership had its heart in the right place, but instead they blamed local enforcement, pointing a finger at overzealous or incompetent local officials. But those protesters in downtown Shanghai really directly challenging the legitimacy of the ruling party and its strongman leader, saying basically the system is the problem. So that is the kind of things that obviously not tolerated in this one-party dictatorship. So there's growing concern and worry about the fate of some of the protesters who got taken away by police. That's why on Sunday, a new crowd formed at the same location in Shanghai with people demanding the protesters' release. But we understand now there is a heavy police presence on site, with the authorities sealing off a larger area surrounding the protester site, but also clearing everyone from the location as well. So there is a lot of fear on the part of the government in terms of this kind of messaging in Shanghai may inspire others across the country. But this latest wave of protests really triggered by a deadly apartment fire in the western region of Xinjiang, and how the authorities there handled the aftermath. Because on one hand, officials insisted their COVID measures had nothing to do with the firefighters' delay in reaching the fire to put it out. But on the other hand, after insisting for weeks that lockdowns must be maintained because of the outbreak there. They all of a sudden announced a phased reopening for the region after the fire. So all of that really serving as the latest and probably the loudest wake-up call for a lot of people in terms of how increasingly unscientific and ineffective, not to mention potentially dangerous this policy has become, and of course all the absurdities surrounding its enforcement. So that's why across China, more and more people seem to be trying to take matters into their own hands by taking to the streets, demanding their freedoms, and also tearing down metal barriers or fences set up by local officials to seal them off in their residences, and also multiple vigils and protests spearheaded by young people on university campuses across the nation. Remember, for a lot of them, they have spent their entire college life in the past 3 years under some forms of lockdown. Just imagine all that pent-up anger and frustration.
Breaking news now coming in, and sources are telling CNN News 18 that in Shanghai, there are police that are now stopping people and checking their phones to see if there are any apps like Telegram, Instagram or Twitter that have been used to share videos of the protests that have been taking place, or to pass on the information about these protests to those outside of China. Remember, several of these apps are banned in China, which is why another series of strict restrictions are now being placed. Abhishek, my colleague, now joins me for more on this. Abhishek, China is notorious as a surveillance state, and they seem to be taking this one step forward as news across the globe is now spoken of only about the fury that is now seen on the streets of China.
Chinese authorities are currently facing, apart from the ongoing protests, are how their strong technical firewalls have been leaking. The videos that we are witnessing from China's streets, roads, and cities and colleges where students in large number have started protesting, people across the country are protesting. World is seeing now these videos of civil unrest, which China have been able to manage somehow over the last several years. So this is a rarity that the world is witnessing, that how people in China have started this civil unrest, and in the side we can see people, police officials and white dress-clad pandemic enforcers all clashing with people. So their brutalities, their oppression against people, so everything the world is witnessing, and that is the challenge that Xi Jinping's start of third presidency is facing right now. Also, this whole pandemic, the unrest that has started with the protests to pandemic-related restrictions and COVID lockdowns, which has actually started snowballing into a political unrest as well, where people have started chanting slogans, demanding stepping down of President Xi Jinping. They have started saying that the system is not letting them live freely. There have been protests where people have shown white papers that is kind of symbolic to censoring in China. So all across, this widespread unrest, civil unrest, is something that is a rarity in China, and current regime of Xi Jinping is clearly having a tough time to manage all this.
Right, the Xi Jinping administration clearly they're not realizing the magnitude of this issue. They clearly cannot keep a lid on the fury that is now out on the streets of major cities in China. For the moment, Abhishek, thank you so much. A quick break on this edition. Back in just 2. Don't go anywhere.
है टर्म्स, ये हिंदुस्तान की राजधानी दिल्ली, उसकी सरकार और उसकी जो तरीके हैं, अपार्ट फ्रॉम डिस्कशंस एंड तू मैं तेंद्र जैन जी के रख रखाव के लिए, उनके रूम के मेंटेनेंस के लिए, उनके रूम के अपकीप के लिए, आप सोच के देखिए किस प्रकार की ये मानसिकता है, ये किस प्रकार का वीआईपी ट्रीटमेंट है।
तेंद्र जैन, जो कि आज भी जेल में रहने पर भी मंत्री है, उसकी आज एक ये वीडियो और सामने आई जिसमें बकायदा उसके कमरे में हाउसकीपिंग की जा रही है, उसका बिस्तर बनाया जा रहा है, बेड बनाया जा रहा है, उसका तकिए लगाए जा रहे हैं, सफाई की जा रही है। और सबसे चौंकाने वाली बात जो सामने आई, उसके अंदर नीचे कालीन बिछाए जा रहे हैं, 2-2 कालीन बिछ रहे हैं। क्या देश के लोगों ने इससे पहले ईमानदार आदमी ऐसा देखा था? ये जेल है, ये 5-स्टार होटल का कमरा।
And Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal has hit back at BJP after they tweeted Satyendra Jain's latest video from Tihar Jail. Kejriwal took a jibe at the BJP and said that the Saffron Party has become a video company and will eventually open a video ward, while Aam Aadmi Party will do all the developmental work if they go on to win the MCD elections.
भारतीय जनता पार्टी ने दिल्ली के अंदर एक गारंटी दी है कि हर वार्ड में एक वीडियो की दुकान खोलेंगे। भारतीय जनता पार्टी अब वीडियो बनाने की कंपनी बन गई है। तो जनता, दिल्ली की जनता इस बार ये तय करेगी कि उनको वीडियो बनाने की कंपनी चाहिए कि सरकार अच्छी चलाने के लिए और उनके बच्चों का भविष्य बनाने के लिए एक पार्टी चाहिए।
Union Minister Anurag Thakur has slammed Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal over his comments on Satyendra Jain's jail tapes. The minister said that Delhi Chief Minister has lost all credibility and will eventually lose all their deposits in the upcoming polls. 20 people were injured in Chandrapur of Maharashtra after slabs fell off a foot-over bridge at the Balhar Shah railway station. In fact, the video of the incident went viral on social media, and the officials from the railway also informed that the injured have now been shifted to the nearby hospital and are undergoing treatment. Nitish Kumar inaugurated the Ganga water supply scheme in Giriyak in Bihar and performed the Ganga Aarti as well. The scheme has been prepared keeping in mind the shortage of water in the state. Now, through the scheme, people will be given water at the rate of 135 litres per day. Uttar Pradesh Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath dubbed Aam Aadmi Party convener Arvind Kejriwal as a quote-unquote namuna or a buffoon. He also accused the Delhi Chief Minister and his party of supporting terrorism and corruption. Remember, this is happening right ahead of Gujarat Assembly polls.
और ये जो आम आदमी पार्टी का नमूना आया है ना यहाँ दिल्ली से, यह तो आतंकवाद का सच्चा हितैषी है। अयोध्या में राम मंदिर का विरोध करता है, भारत के सैनिकों से कहता, बहादुर जवानों से कहता, इसका प्रमाण क्या है?
Amit Malviya took to Twitter to attack Rahul Gandhi for performing Ma Narmada Aarti at the Omkareshwar temple in Madhya Pradesh. The BJP leader wrote, and I quote him here, "Why is the Congress in such tearing hurry to prove that the son of a Catholic mother and a Parsi father..."
Welcome back. You're watching Nation at 5 with me, Poonam Burde, and let's get you some breaking news that's now coming in, and this is over the Tejpal case. The hearing was underway in the Supreme Court, but the Supreme Court has turned down Tejpal's plea. This was for in-camera proceedings as far as the sexual assault case goes. We're now given to understand that Supreme Court has turned down the plea by Tejpal, where he was seeking in-camera hearing of the appeal that was filed by the Goa government against his acquittal. So, a big blow there coming to the fore as far as in-camera proceedings go. Proceedings will be on as usual, and details of which will keep coming out as and when those hearings take place. Tejpal, former boss of Terry, was accused of sexual assault. He was acquitted by a lower court. The Goa government had challenged his acquittal. That hearing is now at the door of the Supreme Court. Ananya, my colleague, now joins me for more on this. Ananya, in-camera proceedings is what Tejpal wanted. That has been now denied.
Well, definitely, Poonam, this is a case, you remember, the state of Goa had been banking upon. It was an appeal filed against a Goa court order which had acquitted Tejpal into this case. And in an application that was filed by Tejpal, he had sought that the Goa government's appeal challenging that particular, acquittal shall be heard in camera is what Tejpal had sought. But the Supreme Court actually turned down this petition. Remember that this appeal is also filed before the Supreme Court, and that's the reason why Tejpal had knocked the doors of the Supreme Court. But then, as you see, this has now been turned down by the court of law, and definitely it's a big setback for Tejpal. Poonam.
Right, big setback there coming to the fore from the Supreme Court for Tejpal for the moment. Thank you so much for getting us the latest. Moving on now to Kerala, where tensions are on the rise over an Adani port. The construction of this port has been halted for over 3 months now by protesters that have been led by Catholic priests who who erected a large shelter blocking the entrance. Police have now registered a case against 3,000 protesters who attacked and vandalized a police station late on Sunday night. On Saturday, the police had booked the Thiruvananthapuram Archbishop, Thomas Netto, an auxiliary bishop, and several other priests in connection with this violence. Now, as per the FIR, people that came to the police station yesterday were armed with weapons. They came there with the intention of releasing these 5 accused in custody. The state government has now told the Kerala High Court that protesters will be made to pay compensation for these damages.
How does the BJP seize the whole violence that happened, the protest against Virginia?
See, the situation in Trivandrum was almost a riot-like situation. I would say that the government of Kerala, especially, they completely failed in maintaining law and order in the at that place. And basically, the government has not taken a serious view of the whole issue. Government has not been able to or have not made serious efforts to convince the people, take the people into confidence, convince even the agitators on the benefits that they will also get by the project that is coming. This port is going to be a major game changer in the developmental scenario of Kerala. So this is not a project that can be shelved. This port has to come up. But the concerns of the people who are affected, that will have to be addressed.
സമരത്തിൽ അവർ ഉയർത്തിയ 7 ആവശ്യങ്ങളിൽ വിഴിഞ്ഞം തുറമുഖത്തിന്റെ പണി നിർത്തിവെക്കണം എന്നതൊഴികെയുള്ള എല്ലാ ആവശ്യങ്ങളും സർക്കാർ അംഗീകരിച്ചതാണ്. അതിന് മന്ത്രിതല ഉപസമിതി ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. അവർ ചർച്ച ചെയ്തിരുന്നു. ഒരു തരത്തിലും ഒരു ഘട്ടത്തിലും ഗവൺമെന്റ് വ്യത്യസ്തമായ സമീപനം സ്വീകരിച്ചിരുന്നില്ല. ഇപ്പോൾ നടന്നിട്ടുള്ള കാര്യങ്ങൾ നിങ്ങൾ മാധ്യമങ്ങൾ റിപ്പോർട്ട് ചെയ്തിട്ട് കാണല്ലോ. വളരെ കേരളത്തിൽ അടുത്ത കാലത്തൊന്നും ഇല്ലാത്ത രൂപത്തിലുള്ള ആസൂത്രിതമായ നീക്കം അതിനകത്തുണ്ട് എന്നാണ് സംശയിക്കേണ്ടിയിരിക്കുന്നത്.
Neetu, my colleague, now joins me for more on this. Neetu, it was the fishing community there that actually has the objections about the construction that is happening at this particular port, and those objections have been raised by them. But it really is the church in the area that has been leading this stir, isn't it?
Yeah, the protests have been led by the Latin Catholic Diocese here, but the fishermen, the fishing community, their concern is that what they are saying is that right after the construction began, the construction of the port is ongoing, they are facing issues of sea erosion much higher than how it was earlier in the past years. So they are saying that this is a concern and this needs to be addressed. They say that their lives and livelihoods are being affected. They are not able to venture out into the sea. The sea erosion is a major issue. So this is the concern that has been raised by the protesters when they have been going on this protest for more than 100 days right now. These protests are ongoing. So these are the concerns that has been raised, but yesterday things have spiraled out of control when you had people marching up to the police station, and according to the police, they were armed, they had iron rods, and they attacked the police personnel, about 38 of them injured. The protesters say that more than 30 of the protesters were also injured, and stones were pelted from the police station side, and it was after that things turned out to be violent. Even people who were not in the protest site on Saturday have been arrested by the police. That is why they went to the police station. So this is what the protesters have been saying. Right now, the all-party meeting that has been called by the district collector is ongoing. Today, the situation has been calm so far. There have not been issues in Birmingham. Yesterday, for about 3.5 hours, the situation was really volatile.
Right, the situation so far at least is calm, at least as of today, Neetu. But the politics over this is also escalating because the BJP is accusing the left of having completely lost control.
As well as the Congress-led UDF, is what they have been saying is that the government is completely failed in handling this crisis and handling these protesters, in convincing them, in understanding their concerns and trying to convince them about that. Also, they have been raising, even opposition leader V.D. Satish has been saying that the government, That is why something like this had happened yesterday. Things spiraled out of control. The government has been a complete failure in addressing this. This is what the opposition, Congress as well as the BJP has been saying. Meanwhile, the government says that this is a very sensitive issue. 5 out of the 7 demands the government agrees to consider. They have even set up a committee to look into the impact of this. But what they're clearly saying is that stopping the work at this point after spending and it's a huge development project, stopping the work and doing this is not possible. So that is the one point where they are having trouble, is what the government is saying. At the same time, the government said that this is a very sensitive issue. The coastal community, they tend to react very emotionally. So they say that they have been handling this situation in a very mature manner, ensuring that there is no loss to life or things don't spiral out of control. So this is what the government has been saying. But definitely the politics over this will continue.
Right, Neetu, thank you so much for getting us the latest as far as the volatility continues there in Kerala. Moving on now to a border issue between Maharashtra and Karnataka. This is over Belagavi and several other villages in the surrounding areas, and that fight continues to escalate between the two states. Now the NCP in Maharashtra has demanded that action be taken against Karnataka Chief Minister Basavaraj Bommai because he is being blamed now for instigating the people of Maharashtra and raking up this border issue. The NCP further added that Bommai's statements have hurt the sentiments of the Aam Aadmi in Maharashtra and that peace has been disturbed not just in Maharashtra but in Karnataka to a great extent as well. There are several Marathi groups that have now written a letter to Maharashtra Minister Chandrakant Patil, who is also a nodal minister, to visit Belgavi and other adjoining areas, hold meetings with the people and ask them what it is that they want. Chandrakant Patil has confirmed to CNN News 18 as well that he would be doing so along with the other nodal minister on the 3rd of December.
The Chief Minister of Karnataka, Mr. Bommai, wants the Shinde-Fadnavis government of Maharashtra to take action against those people who cause disturbances to the state transport buses on the border of Maharashtra and Karnataka. Yes, action should be taken, but in that case, action should also be taken against Mr. Bommai for making such statements that has an influence on the minds of people, making them take negative actions. He had no reason to rake up an issue that was sub judice and then to go further and say that he is going to stake claim on other villages and districts in Maharashtra. His statements are hurting the sentiments of the people and disturbing the peace in both the states.
There are unprecedented protests across China, from Shanghai to Beijing to Wuhan. People are sick and tired of the zero COVID policy, which has seen multiple lockdowns, mass testings and quarantines at a time when the rest of the world seems to have moved on to better and normal times. For the first time, there were slogans against Xi Jinping and the ruling Communist Party. These are kind of protests that China has not seen since 1989 and the Tiananmen Square massacre. But will there be a political fallout on Xi Jinping, particularly after he secured a historic and unprecedented third term only in October? What will it take for these mass protests to threaten the Communist Party's stranglehold over Chinese citizenry? But first, the story of mass protests across major cities in China.
The zero COVID policy has been a disaster, both economically and politically inside China.
Top U.S. health officials add it probably won't stop the spread of COVID-19. That's as thousands of demonstrators across China risk the regime's wrath to protest its pandemic strategy. Some are calling for Chinese President Xi Jinping to step down.
These dictators, unfortunately, have pretty sophisticated means of remaining in power.
The demonstrators say they oppose China's repeat lockdowns and strict quarantines. This man is urging even more people to take a stand.
I think it's going to be very, very difficult for China to be able to contain this through their zero COVID strategy.
Chinese state media disputed that in a newspaper editorial Sunday. It called the zero COVID approach scientifically effective. But the country has reported an increase in new COVID-19 cases for 6 days straight.
They went into a prolonged lockdown without any seeming purpose or end game to it, which really doesn't make public health sense.
Dr. Anthony Fauci calls China's vaccination plan baffling. He says it doesn't focus on vulnerable populations or use the most effective vaccines.
I would recommend that they pursue the strategy of making sure everybody gets vaccinated, particularly their elderly.
I'll go across to Selena Wong, who's a CNN correspondent joining us live from Beijing. There have been massive protests across some of the biggest cities from Shanghai, Beijing, Wuhan. It's the biggest protest we've seen in China since 1989 in Tiananmen. Selena, what exactly are the factors that are fueling these protests?
We are witnessing an extraordinary, a historic moment, and what we are seeing is pent-up anger over 3 years of this draconian lockdown that has upended people's livelihoods, their lives. There have been countless stories of people struggling and dying in these lockdowns because they can't get enough food, essentials, or emergency help when they're in a sealed-off building. But what really catalyzed this nationwide wave of rage is a deadly fire that broke out in the far west region of Xinjiang. Videos online showed a high apartment building on a high floor. A fire is blazing with smoke coming from the building, but fire trucks appear to be delayed and hampered from getting close enough to the scene because of COVID restrictions. The video shows metal barriers and fences that are frequently used when buildings are locked down. Other video shows the water coming from the fire trucks not actually hitting the building. That was a stark reminder to the population that could have been any of us living here, trapped in a sealed off lockdown building, unable to get out, unable to get help. That was really the straw that broke the camel's back this time. But it's not just that isolated case. It is countless heartbreaking stories that have come before the fires in Xinjiang, and people who are just tired and fed up with the zero COVID policies that have not allowed people to live a normal life in China for 3 years.
And what's been the larger impact of this zero COVID policy on China's economic health? After all, it is the second largest economy in the world. Why are the Chinese authorities continuing with it, persisting with it?
This zero COVID policy has hit virtually every part of the economy. It has devastated consumer confidence, business confidence. Countless small businesses have had to shut down. It's incredibly difficult for even the most large and sophisticated corporations to operate under a myriad of COVID rules. We saw unrest at the Foxconn factory just these past few weeks because they've been dealing with a COVID outbreak, and China has this closed loop rule, which means that those factory workers have to live, work, sleep on site. That's costly and difficult to manage. And the workers were complaining about the unsanitary conditions and living quality at that closed loop system in the factory. So the question is, why is China continuing with the zero COVID policy? Now, there's a lot of factors to this. The party has been repeating over and over again that zero COVID is successful. It's prevented China from experiencing the mass waves of deaths that we've seen in other parts of the world, millions of deaths in other countries. China says their policy is putting people's lives above all else. And they point to the elderly population that is still vulnerable. They have a lagging vaccination rate, although it is another question as to why they haven't boosted that rate of vaccination for the elderly population. They also point to the uneven healthcare resources in China. There are still many places in rural China where the healthcare resources would not be able to deal with an influx of COVID patients.
All right, Selena Wong, live for us tonight in Beijing. Thanks very much for joining us indeed. Let's bring you up to speed with these pictures. Where are we getting these pictures from? It's not just small towns. It's across the biggest cities of China, from Beijing to Shanghai, Wuhan. And it all started, as Selena said a moment ago, what happened in Urumqi, in Xinjiang, where a bunch of people were trapped inside a quarantined building. The building caught on fire. Firefighters were not able to get to that building because it was a COVID zone. This, of course, is also popular anger and frustration at Xi Jinping and the ruling Communist Party's zero COVID strategy. Remember, China has this strict zero COVID strategy at a time when the rest of the world, including, countries like Qatar, are hosting the World Cup right now. So Chinese citizens have been seeing this in their television screens and asking questions of their government as to why don't we have anything like a normal life. And then, of course, in Beijing as well as in Shanghai, overnight, that's Saturday night and Sunday night, you had cops and protesters, sometimes even coming to blows. In Beijing, of course, it was in the Liangmahe part of town. It's central Chaoyang district in Beijing. In Shanghai, too, they were protesting at a street named after Urumqi, the provincial capital of Xinjiang, which is where the protests started off from. So clearly, it seems like a bit of a watershed moment, if you will. China has not seen this scale of protests and this breadth of protests across cities since the 1989 Tiananmen massacre. Let me now go across to our guests who are joining us on the broadcast this evening. Professor Brahmachalani, strategic affairs expert. Aina Tangent is a political affairs commentator. Atul Malhotra is a former diplomat.